Welcome to another edition of Hey Bobby with Senior VP of our Cleveland Guardians, Bob DiBiasio, with us on WAKR. And I wanted to spend some time with Bob today talking about Heritage Park. We often talk about players going into the team's Hall of Fame and the addition of Heritage Park years ago. Had a chance to really walk down in there and just spend a lot of time in there about a month ago prior to one of the games. And if you haven't been in there, I urge you to do it. And I'm if you listen to Bobby and I talk, you know I love baseball history. And there's just so much history about our Indians/Guardians in there, and it's really well done. So Bobby, why don't we start right there? Maybe talk about the idea originally of putting in Heritage Park out there and kind of what is inside that place. It's really well done.
Well, first and foremost, anytime I think of Heritage Park, the image of Bob Feller in a bobcat knocking down the walls of what was back there prior to Heritage Park. When we opened the building, we wanted to bring over one of the concepts of Cleveland Stadium that older fans really embraced, and that was behind the fence parties. Players would come out and mingle with fans who would have, hot dogs, hamburgers. You paid for that experience, and batting practice for the other team would be going on, and balls would come over the fence and smash into your potato salad and things of that nature, just like it happened at the opening of Jacobs Field. And when that became an area that just wasn't quite doing enough for us in that piece of real estate, we came up with a concept of Heritage Park, that we needed a place where we truly honored the rich history of our franchise. And so we had to tear it all down and start over. So Bob Feller gets into this bobcat and starts knocking down walls. And, he was a tractor guy. For everybody that listens to this regularly knows he's a farm boy from Van Meter, Iowa, and had his own collection of tractors in his home on the east side and in his barn. And he just was in heaven, knocking stuff over like crazy. And there was a time when he almost went too far, and Curtis and I were sitting there holding our heads that he didn't tip over, and that would be the story. But anyway, 2007 is when we opened Heritage Park. It plays tribute to obviously the greatest players and the most memorable moments in franchise history. Two-tiered. The top tier features a statue of Frank Robinson presenting the lineup card on the first day that he became the first black manager in the history of Major League Baseball. And the plaques up on that level are those players who are inducted into the Guardians Hall of Fame and are in Cooperstown. The lower tier is the rest of the Guardians Hall of Fame members, the top 100 roster, laid out in the ground throughout both tiers are memorable moments that fans can check out. We have some remarkable artifacts. The Ray Chapman plaque, which itself is an incredibly historic piece. Larry Doby monument, a few other pretty incredible items. So yeah, it's open before the game, during the game, briefly after the game as you're walking out and you want to take a quick walk through. But as you say, once your legs get a little sore and you need to walk around the ballpark, we call it the third inning stroll. While you're going to get something to eat or drink, yeah, take a little breather and walk through the history of our franchise.
For those that didn't see the movie of the Ray Chapman, you mentioned the Ray Chapman plaque, and I absolutely love the movie. And we did, as you know, a thing over in Barberton to
Yeah.
benefit the Salvation Army together. Talk about that story when you got the call about people digging things up from the old baseball park and said, Bobby, you got to get down here.
Jimmy Goldsmith, one of our great operations guys, started as a part-timer and then became a full-time guy, older guy, just the nicest man. And I'm sorry, Jimmy Goldwire. I said Goldsmith, Jimmy Goldwire. Um, Everything that was in Cleveland Stadium was brought over to Jacobs Field and thrown in went from old storage rooms to new storage rooms. And we didn't do quite the inventory. So after a number of years, we all of a sudden needed a tremendous amount of storage room as we, went through our first decade or two in the new building. And so a complete clean out, a complete inventory was the challenge. And all of a sudden I'm sitting at my desk and I get a call from Jim Goldwire, and he says, Bobby, you won't believe what we just found. You got to get down here immediately. And he had known the story, being an older guy. Um, from the day I started in 1979, old timers would ask me, where's the Ray Chapman plaque? It used to hang at League Park and it used to hang on the wall in Cleveland Stadium. And then all of a sudden it's gone. And I had no idea what they're talking about. I knew of the plaque, but I never knew that it hung at Cleveland Stadium and was no longer around. I didn't know that piece of history. And so, all these old timers would keep asking. And Jimmy knew that story. And I walked down and there's this crate that is sitting there, and they put the top back on it so they could be dramatic. Got a crowbar and lifted the top off, and there's the Ray Chapman plaque, and I almost fainted. It was like finding a buried treasure. It was the coolest thing, and took it to a friend of mine who cleaned it up and made it beautiful. And we immediately found a place for it in Heritage Park. War on the Diamond is what you're referencing, my friend. Yeah, that was fun. You and I down in Barberton, they showed that movie at that movie theater and raised some money for the Salvation Army. That was fun.
It was a good night for sure. Senior VP with the Guardians, Bob DiBiasio. He mentioned, out beyond the center field fence. That's where I got my first taste of stardom out there beyond the center field walls. A little kid came over from Pennsylvania. I'm out in the center field area, picnic time, and this gigantic guy comes over to me and he shakes my hand. He says, "Sir, you a baseball fan?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." He says, "I'm Luke Easter." He said, "Good to meet you." And he says, "Keep playing that game of baseball." And he signed my little baseball glove. And I was captivated at that point on.
Luke,
Bobby,
Luke was one of the most gentle giants you ever met in your life. That's
oh,
beautiful. That's a
he had
beautiful
he
story.
had me from hello to say.
Yeah.
Speaking of going back in time with Guardians, last week it was the anniversary of Earl Averill passing away. And this is a guy I know you knew some history because we did the Indians Insanity thing going back almost a decade ago, where we had a lot of fun in the month of March. But this is a guy that was really, really good. And sometimes in Cleveland history, you don't think about Earl Averill. But Bobby, this guy was sensational and maybe a little bit on the Earl, the guy from Wisconsin for us that made his mark in Cleveland baseball history.
Well, actually, he's from Washington, the state of Washington. He
Okay.
was the Earl of Snohomish, which was Snohomish, Washington. So
There
that's
you
what they called him. His nickname was the Earl of Snohomish. I actually got to become really good friends with his son, who actually played for us as well, Earl
go.
Averill Jr., who would call, especially when we would travel to Seattle, and I'd take care of him with tickets, and we'd talk ball. And throughout the summer, he would call and check in, before email days and all of that. He wanted to know about his baseball team and the team that his dad was a star for. Earl, um, I guess the highlight, just to tell people if they're not familiar with Earl Averill, is he's certainly in our Hall of Fame. He's 1975 was inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. His number 3 was the third number to be retired in our franchise history. So I think in our rich history, for him to be the third person, the third man to have their uniform number retired, obviously means he was an incredible standout. First, of course, Bob Feller, number 19, then Lou Boudreau, number 5, and then it was Earl Averill. Again, the third player to have his number retired. He, until the likes of Jimmy Thome and Albert Bell and Manny Ramirez, he was the all-time home run leader in franchise history. Sits at number 4, I believe, right now. Got to double check where our man Jose is off the top of my head. Earl might be dropping in the home run category. He was a 6-time All-Star. He played in the big leagues 13 years. He played 11 for us. And not a big guy. He was 5'9", 180, 170, 180 pounds. A swift center fielder who could hit and hit with power. He still dots the top of our offensive career stats in like 14 offensive categories. Still, number 1 in RBIs, the only man in our franchise history to have more than 1,000 RBIs.
Earl Averill. That's a name to, and if you go to Heritage Park, look him up for sure.
Check out his plaque. He's in the top row.
There you go. This guy knows. He knows. Senior VP with the Cleveland Guardians, Bob DiBiasio. We call it Hey Bobby. We appreciate his time with us each week. We'll do it again next week. Bobby, is always my friend. Thank you for making time for us here in Akron.
Always fun, Ray. You take care, sir. Go Guardians.